Assalamu alaikum everyone, you're watching SamiSpeaks. My name is Sami Tinisimi. It's good to be back with you all again. We've got a big show for you all this week with a lot to get into, a lot to discuss. It's been quite a slow news week, right? We're going to have a look at what's been going on in Thetford in Norfolk, the protests and the unrest happening there. We're also today going to have a look at the recent release of the Ben Shapiro and Daily Wire movie, Run, Hide, Fight, Infidels, I believe it's called. I mean, it's just complete Zionist Israeli propaganda. It couldn't be more blatant. It couldn't be more obvious. They're so desperate, right? You can have all the money and the biggest platform, the biggest production budget in the world, and you're not going to be able to reshape public opinion, guys, right? Oh, you get people to hate the Muslims because you can see how sad Ben Shapiro is. He's completely falling out with everyone. It's hilarious to see. But, you know, we're going to have a look at this movie. It's complete propaganda. It's just, it couldn't be more obvious. I mean, it's not even really something worth paying attention to, but we'll have a look at it nonetheless because it's funny, right? It's funny. It's fun. Our featured story today is Rupert Lowe's interview with BBC Radio 4. Now, albeit quite a short interview, but this is the thing with Rupert Lowe, is that even a short interview, there's so much to debunk within that interview itself. So, you know, so long as he continues to say all this rubbish, we will continue to debunk it, right? So let's get straight into that. Rupert Lowe is interviewed by Nick Robinson of BBC Radio 4, and they sit down, they have a conversation, and it makes for quite a good interview, right? Because Nick Robinson, he challenges Rupert Lowe, and he doesn't really get much of a response because Lowe is not answering the questions. He's just completely spewing his rubbish. He's used to sitting down with people that agree with him. So when he sits down with someone that disagrees with him, by any metric, right? By any metric, Lowe is completely destroyed here. Because the thing is that if you're not willing to answer the questions, you already lost, right? You're not even willing to answer the questions. So he can try and hide behind, oh, you're the BBC and so on and so forth. Yeah, I mean, public opinion, from a public opinion angle, BBC is not liked in this country. The BBC is not liked whatsoever. But you can't hide behind that, right? You have to at least have the conversation. If you've agreed to an interview, you can't just say, I'm not going to answer the questions. Nick Robinson starts the conversation off by saying, by asking, what is Restore Britain? What does Restore Britain mean, right? And, Lowe, it's probably the only question he answers, but he says that, look, Restore Britain, we're a party, we want to sort of restore Britain to its former glory days where we had a low national debt, where we had, we didn't have crime, and it was a safe society, high trust society. And, I mean, who can't get behind that, There's no reasonable person that will disagree with any of that. But that's not what the party is. The party is sort of a single issue party. It's sort of made its whole thing, its whole shtick is just immigration, right? And Muslims, to be honest with you. So what does he do? Basically, that's all they speak about during the entirety of the interview. I know Lowe says he wants to discuss his economic paper, but instead, what does he do? Robinson asks him, we're sort of, you're saying that we're hurtling towards, becoming an Islamic country, right? What do you mean by that, right? What's your evidence for that? Because we know, right, any reasonable person knows that Muslims make up what? A few million in the United Kingdom. Pakistanis, they like to talk about Pakistanis, they make up 2.7% of the United Kingdom, right? And apparently Pakistanis are invading the UK. They're not even 3% of the population. We like to clown Marlon West, right? And how poorly he did in the Manchester mayoral by-election, couldn't even get 8.7% of the vote, but at least that's still higher than the Pakistani population, right? So that's another lie he says. Marlon West did brilliantly. Marlon West did terribly. Let's just not, I mean, there's no beating around the bush to be done here. Marlon West couldn't even get 10% of the vote. And in fact, for all this begging that Lowe is doing for Farage's help, even when you combine the restore number, the reform number, it's still not even 30%, right? I think Labour got 43 or 47% of the vote. So it's still nowhere near Labour's share. I'm not a Labour guy myself, but, these are points that need to be made, right? Because you can say what you want. You can describe your party however you want. But you know, you're only going to be able to implement any of this. And even if you do get into power, you're going to have to appease, you know, the electorate, because as much as many of you may think on the right that the whole country's like this, it's not true. For you to get elected, you're going to have to move closer to the centre, just like Farage is doing. Farage is smart enough to know this because he's been in politics long enough. But Lowe himself thinks that, you know, Twitter's going to get him elected as Prime Minister. I don't know if he actually believes this, or he thinks it's sort of his last hope now that he's out of reform. But you can't win an election through Twitter, right? We saw this time and time again. We've said this about James Fishback in Florida. We saw this with Thomas Massey, albeit I quite like him, but we saw this with Thomas Massey in Kentucky in the United States. And we see it time and time again during every single election, right? Even a Corbyn will move closer to the centre. A Zohran Mamdani in New York will move closer to the centre, right? Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, who just got elected. You don't think he's going to move closer to the centre the closer they get to the primary in November? So it's either that Lowe doesn't understand politics, or he knows that we're still too far out from an election to move closer to the centre. But, you know, he has this conversation. They also discuss the rape gang inquiry report, which we've debunked on the show before. The 250,000 number is completely fake. And really, Robinson should have read this report, because he says, I haven't read the report. You should read the report. And I encourage everyone to read the report, right? As a Muslim, I say to my Muslim friends, read the report. The 219-page report, read it. Why? Because when you read it and you look at the numbers and you see that they don't go anywhere, right? And you see that they're not backed up by anything, and you see that this 250,000 peddled by Lowe and peddled by even Elon, the richest man in the world, you will see that this number's completely bogus. It's not real. It is an estimate. It's not a real number. The real number is actually 3,073, okay? From 3 areas, from Rotherham, from Telford, and from Oxford, okay? So it's a fake number. We've actually got the numbers, right? But they don't want to talk about the actual numbers, the child sexual exploitation numbers. We have the data, and we can see that, like we've just said, Pakistanis make up 2.7% of the population, and yet they make up 2.2% of child sexual exploitation, right? They make up 2.2%, right? 0.5% less than their population size. So they are underrepresented. The white British, they make up 83% of the population, and yet they make up, I believe, 85 to 88% of child sexual exploitation cases. This doesn't even need to be said. You come up to someone in the street and you say, who's committing the majority of rape and of sexual assault, child sexual exploitation, gang rape? 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 times, they'll come back and they'll say, that will be the white majority, right? And even size to ratio, right? Even per capita, we can see the child sexual exploitation tells us that Pakistanis are underrepresented, and it tells us that the white British are overrepresented. So it's complete projection. They're just projecting it on us, right? To make themselves feel better. But you need to sort out your own problems in your own communities before coming to us, right? Because our people, what are we doing? We're going to university, we're becoming educated, we're becoming lawyers, and we're becoming doctors, right? We're becoming engineers, we're studying, we're benefiting the country, paying taxes, right? While you guys are falling behind. So and you've always got to blame someone, right? PRS, problem, reaction, solution. Rupert Lowe is a genius at this. And we'll see what happens, right, with his next interview. But you can be certain that we'll discuss it and we'll debunk it, right? Because his whole platform is completely held up by lies, just complete lies, right? and the fools that are falling for it. The last thing I want to say here, Nick Robinson questions Rupert Lowe and says, you've got this report that states that white Britons will become a minority by 2063. Within the definition of this report, 54-page report by Matt Goodwin, Professor Matt Goodwin, who I believe is actually at Reform, but nevertheless, he says you've got this 54-page report, and it says that white Britons will become a minority by 2063, but it defines white Britons as their parents, both their parents have been born here, right? And Rupert Lowe says, well, look, you know, I subscribe to that belief. I think that white Britons will become a minority by 2063. And Nick Robinson says, well, by that definition, King Charles III, the king of this country, would not be considered a white Briton because Philip was born in Greece. And Lowe is like, the fact that you can't just say, look, you know, King Charles III is a white Briton. He can't even, like, I don't know if he thinks his base is going to disavow him if he says that Charles III isn't a white Briton. But if he's saying, I mean, both my parents are born here. Does that, a Muslim guy, I'm more white, I'm more British than King Charles III. Yo, these are the types of people we're dealing with, right? I thought Lowe was supposed to be an educated guy. He went to university, no? So, you know, I thought he was supposed to be a step up from his supporters, but turns out that's not the case. But that, I mean, we'll leave it on that, right? Because it's just complete bogus. But yeah, complete. They call it a masterclass, disaster class. This interview was complete car crash of an interview. But it's expected to see from someone like Rupert Lowe, right? How low can he go? We'll see. We'll see. I also today want to have a look at the protests and the unrest happening in Thetford in Norfolk, right? So essentially, we've had about 3 nights of protest, about 3 nights of unrest over a HMO, right? It's not an asylum hotel, it's a house, and it's essentially, you've got some inhabitants, some asylum seekers who are awaiting their confirmation, whether their asylum claim will be approved or will be rejected. And if it's rejected, of course, they'll be sent back home. So, you know, I don't want to be too aggressive here because I can understand where some of these protesters are coming from. However, when you actually look at what's been going on in Thetford, they've been protesting this HMO. They've also been protesting a plan to turn an ex-RAF base into another HMO, right? Where it will be able to house loads and loads of asylum seekers while they await their claims. So these asylum seekers, because I don't think we've discussed this in full on the show before, so I'm going to give you the facts, right? These asylum seekers are given about, I think it's just under £50 per week to live, right? So they're given about £200 a month for food and for necessities and for all of this, because with the greatest respect to the government, these asylum claims take way too long because, you know, it can take up to a year, if not more than a year, for these claims to be processed and to be whether approved or rejected. That's far too long because I can see how this argument can come up. Well, look, it's costing the taxpayer so-and-so. It doesn't really cost the taxpayer that much. It still does cost the taxpayer. I think it costs the taxpayer about, it's no more than £100 per year. I think it's about £70 per year. And they'll make the argument, look, it's still £70 per year. And I don't disagree, but you have to also understand that Britain is a country, a democratic country where it prides itself with these certain values, right? With these values of sort of bringing people in and, you know, giving them a new way of life, allowing them to live in a way that they couldn't in their host nation. And, you know, whether I agree or disagree with that, that's kind of the premise of the country, right? You can say that, but the thing is with the legislation in this country, once they sort of set foot in this country, they can't just be like pushed out. And I know certain, individuals will say, well, we'll repeal the legislation and we'll create new legislation. I mean, it can be done, right? And we'll see whether it happens, but it's never going to happen under a Labour government or even a Conservative government, because like I said, these parties pride themselves of, being tolerant and being tolerant of other people and allowing them to step foot in this country and allowing them to sort of start a new life here, and flee from wars or treachery or any worries that they have in their host country. And 9 out of 10 countries, especially the Western countries, all have, asylum. They all allow asylum seekers in their country. And it's not like they just allow anyone into the country. They'll have these asylum claims, and whether they succeed or they don't succeed is up to the people that are issuing asylum. But whether we agree or disagree, there's ways to go about it. And if you want to protest, you obviously protest to the government and you say, look, we don't want this anymore, right? We will not elect you into power, because the reality is you are the electorate. So if you don't want to vote, if you really think this is a mass, the country's in mass agreement on this issue, then you can very easily, the next election that comes around, just don't vote the party into power that has this in their manifesto, right? Or instead vote for the party that has in their manifesto to completely abolish the asylum system. So the power is in your hands. If you really think it is a mass appeal problem, right? So, or there's mass appeal to what you're saying, but there's ways of going about it. You vote your way out of it, right? If you really think you have the numbers that you're saying, or if you are just a vocal minority, which is obviously the opinion that I subscribe to. But nevertheless, there's ways to go about it. The way you don't go about it, because what we saw in Thetford is we saw police officers assaulted. We've saw, not just assaulted, I've read that a female police officer was bitten. I'm not even joking here. A female police officer was bitten, Mike Tyson style, right? And she's now in hospital. Another male police officer had a rock thrown at him, right? So 2 police officers hospitalized because of the thuggery, right? This is not law and order. I thought the right wing was supposed to subscribe to law and order. You have these thugs on the street, these white thugs on the street, biting female officers, throwing rocks at male officers, hospitalizing officers, not respecting law and order whatsoever, right? Throwing eggs at the HMO, right? These asylum seekers are having to be escorted out of their homes and placed somewhere else for the time being while the unrest settles. So what are these British values? Are these the British values you subscribe to, right? If you want to debate it, you can debate it. If you feel like you want to change it, you can vote your way out of it. But time and time again, you fail. Manchester mayoral by-election, 8.7%, Marlon West. The Makerfield by-election, who wins? The Labour candidate, obviously, Andy Burnham. So, you're having time and time again, you can't win a by-election, you can't win a mayoral election. What makes you think you're going to win a general election? With the greatest respect. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's not costing the taxpayer that much. We have a system here, we have an asylum system. If you want more checks and you want more vetting, then I can get behind that, no problem. And if you want reduction, immigration, we've discussed this. Shabana Mahmood puts the figure out, 82% decrease in net migration, right? Even asylum claims. If you actually look at asylum claims right now, they're actually down, right? Asylum claims are down, 82% decrease in net migration, right? Small boats are up slightly, but small boats are what percent of net immigration? No more than 5%, right? Very, very small percent. So that's what's going on in Thetford, right? That's the sites we're seeing in Thetford. Complete thuggery, right? They talk about the minorities committing crime, but they have quite literally bitten a female officer. They threw a rock at a male police officer. Those officers are now hospitalized. So as someone who's completely and utterly pro-law and order, pro-police, right? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Vote your way out of it. Vote a candidate in your constituency, right? That will speak for you. Or is it a vocal minority, which is what I've been saying for however long, right? So that's what's going on in Thetford, and we'll continue to update what's going on there. But it looks like there was just sort of 3 nights of unrest. I believe it was Wednesday through Friday, and it's calmed down now, which is good, right? Because we don't want to see anyone get hurt. If you want to sort of debate it, you want to sort of rebuke the system, the asylum claim system, no problem. But you can't be assaulting police officers. My goodness, right? My goodness. I also, today at the outset, want to have a look at... so there's a movie trailer that has been released by Ben Shapiro called Run, Hide, Fight, Infidels, right? So this is a sequel to one of his earlier movies. I believe it was in 2020, called Run, Hide, Fight. I believe it went to one of the film festivals, but the critics hated it, right? I think it got 30%, really sort of bad movie. And this is what you can expect from a small company like Daily Wire, because in the grand scheme of things, they're a small media company. But this is nothing, Run, Hide, Fight in 2020 was about school shootings, I believe, right? If I can remember correctly. This is not about school shootings. This is essentially an anti-Islam movie bought and paid for by Ben Shapiro, right? Jewish and sort of Zionist Ben Shapiro, who can see public opinion has never been more against Israel and Zionism. I don't want to say Jews, right? Because we don't want to conflate the two. I know it's so popular these days to say such and such, but as a Muslim, these are still, Jews and Christians are still people of the book, right? So I'm not here to, although we have theological disagreement, they are still people of the book. And my religion tells me we disagree with the people of the book, but we do respect them because they are closest to us. So I'm not here to talk about, because frankly, I don't even believe Shapiro subscribes to the Judaism that he really should subscribe to, right? Because if you speak to a lot of the Jews who actually follow the Torah, right, they will tell you that Israel is not something that should even exist as a country. Because they believe their Messiah, which obviously has not come down yet, they believe their Messiah will form the Israeli state. So it's not for some political or Zionist cause to establish an Israeli or a Jewish state, but that is for the Messiah to do. So you'll speak to a lot of the Jews, and they'll tell you this. And I've spoke to them myself. But when we look at Shapiro, he is a Zionist more than he is a Jew, right? From what I can gauge. In fact, he is an Israeli more than he is an American. I don't know why anyone hasn't asked him this yet, but why don't we ask Shapiro? Is it Israel or is it the United States? You can only choose one. We all know what he's going to choose. We all know he's going to choose Israel, right? Because the problem with dual loyalty is that there's always one above the other. And for Mr. Shapiro, of course, Israel is above the United States, right? So he's gauging public opinion. He can see that the Zionist cause, the Israeli cause, has never been less popular than it is today. Never been as less popular. When we see the protests happening, right? We talk about protests just then. Yeah, it's a small protest. 100 people at best. We're seeing hundreds of thousands, 500,000 plus, protesting in the street, not for the Israeli Jews, not because of what happened on October the 7th, but for the Palestinian cause. Because any human being with a heart can see what's gone on in Palestine, and is going on still to this day at a lesser extent. And they see that and they say, look, this is despicable. I mean, how could you not describe this as a genocide? And Shapiro hates that. Because Shapiro's whole thing, his whole shtick, he will quite literally fall out with people because of this issue. Megyn Kelly. I don't know if him and Tucker Carlson were really even that close anyway, but even Tucker Carlson, right? Candace Owens, the biggest example. He will fall out with these people because of one issue, because of the country he holds in regard the highest, right? And he holds it in regard higher than anything else. It's the Jewish state, the Israeli state. Because without a state, we're nothing. So, he releases this trailer called Run, Hide, Fight, Infidels because he can gauge public opinion. He is seeing what's happening in Michigan with Abdul El-Sayed. He has seen what's happened in New York with Zohran Mamdani. He's seen what's happened across the United States with AOC, with Ilhan Omar, with Rashida Tlaib. And although I disagree with these people quite vehemently, to be honest with you, on a lot of issues, at least they have the brass neck, at least they have the confidence to go against the mainstream and say, look, what we're seeing in Palestine is a genocide, right? And these types of people who would have never, ever been elected years prior are now being elected. Abdul El-Sayed wins his primary in Michigan, Democratic primary, beating Haley Stevens. And it's very likely that he will beat, I believe it's Mike Rogers, the Republican candidate, in November, okay? Even Fishback, who I don't think will win, at least he has some supporters behind him, right? He will very likely do better than the polls are saying right now. I don't think he'll win, but he will definitely do better than the polls are saying. He'll definitely get better than a few percent of the vote, right? So, yeah, the movie trailer, I mean, Run, Hide, Fight, Infidels, essentially what the thing is that they have this, it starts with the voiceover of some sort of Muslim terrorist, and then it shows a visual of this Muslim terrorist who, by the way, looks like, I mean, I never saw a more Jewish looking guy. When I saw it, before I saw the ISIS flag, I thought, is this about the IDF, the biggest terrorist organization in the world? I'm like, what is Shapiro doing? This is not the movie I thought you'd be making, my friend. You're on my side now. But no. The most Jewish looking guy, the big nose and everything, turns out like he's playing the Muslim. Oh yeah, of course, because you're not going to get a Muslim to play this terrorist for you, are you? So he gets his Jewish friend to play the terrorist, and there's an ISIS flag in the back, and you've got this girl, and you know she's a hostage and all of this, and it's all happening in the US. When has this ever happened? When has ISIS ever has ISIS ever invaded the United States? In fact, when has any terrorist organization ever invaded the United States? With the exception of Al-Qaeda in 2001. Remove that, right? When have there been any other examples of terrorist organizations, Islamic terrorist organizations invading the United States? I'd like an answer, please. Because it's zero. It's quite literally zero. They've never invaded the United States. Have they been adversarial to the United States? Yes. Have they criticized the United States? Yes. Have they killed any Americans in the United States? No. Right? On the other hand, have the US come into these Muslim countries, invaded these Muslim countries, and killed Muslims? Yes. Right? So why are we not making the Run, Hide, Fight, the American version of the American soldiers and the Israeli soldiers going into Palestine, going into Iraq, going into Afghanistan, right? Because if you want to play this game, what values are they trying to bring to these countries? Judeo-Christian values. So is this a religious thing? You want to make it a religious thing? We can make it a religious thing, okay? We want to talk about the atrocities. We want to talk about the Iraq war, the war in Afghanistan, right? We want to talk about Syria. We want to talk about the Holocaust, because whether you like it or not, that was perpetrated by a Christian cause. There's actually a paper you can read by Naveed Sheikh, which is called Body Count, right? Body Count, it's a quantitative paper where it looks at all of the sort of mass genocides and wars and conflicts and political violence. And it looks at all of them, right? And it combines the numbers, the casualty numbers. And Christianity is way at the top. Christianity, 30%, right? They look at 7 different sort of beliefs, right? They're not all religious, because anti-theist, which is anti-religion, is actually at number 2 with 20%. Muslims all the way at the bottom, number 6 of 7. Number 6 of 7. But number 6 of 7, right? And they are at, Islam's at 5%. So we want to talk about terrorism. Why don't we look at the American military, right? It's the truth. It's the truth. So run, hide, fight, infidels. I mean, it's not even worth discussing, and I haven't even really discussed it because the movie trailer is just a joke. Jonathan Majors stars in this movie. I swear he was, at least there were allegations brought towards him for assault. You know, and when these actors get cancelled, they have no other choice, but they just subscribe to these awful scripts, awful screenplays, awful movies, right? They don't even get released theatrically because they're so bad. First Citizen Vigilante, aimed for the European, the British audience, and now we've got Run, Hide, Fight, Infidels, and it's going to flop, just as the other one flopped, right? Because these ideas will continue to flop, because they're unpopular, right? Nobody likes these opinions. Just look at media, right? Look at independent media. Shapiro's numbers every day are sinking, right? I look at Josh Hammer, right? Who debated Dave Smith for Turning Point, right? I looked at his numbers the other day. Josh Hammer, who's been doing this a long time, right? Far more than little Sami over here, 20-year-old Sami. And the guy can't even get a few hundred views on his podcast. We're at SamiSpeaks getting more views, independent show, than Josh Hammer, who I believe is at least, his show is coming at you from one of the mainstream publications. I can't remember now. But he's not an independent show. He's funded by someone. But this is the reality, right? Is that this narrative is dead because you've killed 70,000 innocent Gazans, right? You've destroyed college campuses. You've killed journalists. You've done it all across the Middle East. And we won't forget this. As much as you may want to appease the boomers with these movies, right? The Gen Z, the Zoomers, have had enough, and we will continue to rebuke this nonsense. And when the movie comes out, I'm sure it'll be an even bigger story. Maybe we'll discuss it further then, inshallah. I think that's the end for today. We've gone over a lot. Alhamdulillah, we've discussed a lot, and we will continue to next week, next Sunday, inshallah. I will see you then. I've been Sami T. Naseem as always, and inshallah I'll see you next Sunday. Assalamu alaikum.